What's up, comic book fans? Pete here from Comic Books Transformed, where we talk about your favorite adaptations based on comic books that you love, such as comic books that get adapted into live streaming shows or movies. Today, I am here with my good friend and co host, Mr. Coors Hair, Brian. Oh, that way. There we go. Brian, how's it going, man, in the tri state area?
Doing good.
Yes.
It's fine over here, I guess.
All right. That was super interesting answer to start off with. We're good.
I never have good things to say in the beginning. My good stuff comes when you ask me questions about the show.
You got to build up a flow, huh? You got to get it going. All right. Well, let's get that.
Never good starting or ending conversations. I'm okay in the middle.
All right. Well, let's get it going then. Let's get right to it then. Let's get to the meat and potatoes. We are talking about The Last of Us episode 5, which is entitled Endure and Survive. And the thing is, Brian just reminded me that there was also a shit ton of Super Bowl commercials that were for comic book movies. And so we have to talk about those too after we finish The Last of Us. So we're going to be talking about the Flash trailer. We're going to be talking about the very small Transformers trailer and the Guardians of the Galaxy 3 trailer too. So stick around if you're interested in those things. Just off top of, just for fun, which of those three are you the most excited about?
I'm excited about seeing or excited about talking about?
Excited about talking about.
The Flash.
Nice. Okay, me too. All right,
seeing, I think I'm a little biased, but
Right. For those of you that are listening and this is the podcast, Brian is sitting in front of an army of about 1,000 Transformers. So, yeah. All right, let's do Last of Us then. So we have episode 5, Endure and Survive, and we get exposed to. Wow, I am like totally off today. Henry and so they're in the game, right?
Yes, Henry and Sam are in the game. Again, like we mentioned last week, this was in Pittsburgh instead of Kansas City. Not really a big deal. I think it makes more sense to be Kansas City because it almost seems weird that they went so far south to Pittsburgh before going west. So yeah, that's fine. So to me, this was one of the being several years removed from playing the actual game. This was one of the things that stood out that I was looking for with this particular how they were going to adapt this. And they did adapt it fairly closely. They changed a couple details, but essentially it's the same storyline and the same outcome. So this was one of the most memorable things in the game to me is this the interaction with these two characters. The main differences being that in the game, Sam was a little bit older and he was not deaf.
Yes.
I think the addition of him being deaf adds a layer. A nice layer to their situation in this. The age is give or take. It doesn't. I don't think it hurt, but I don't think it helped better or anything either way.
Yes. Well, in the behind the scenes, did you watch the behind the scenes after the episode?
Yes.
Okay, so Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann, the creators of the show. Neil Druckmann is the game creator. They discussed how Sam, like you said, is not deaf in the game, and they said how that gives him yet another layer of dependency on Henry. Like he needs Henry for even more. And so it's interesting because I have a little bit of experience with sign language. I took it in college, and then I'm in my mom's apartment right now, and she is a sign language interpreter. Probably the reason why I'm fucking up my language, like what I'm saying during this episode, is because she's cooking bacon in her kitchen right now, and like I'm like salivating. I haven't had dinner yet. It's just like messing me up, but. Anyway, let's go back to these poor guys that are in Kansas City. Who
are not eating bacon.
Who are not eating bacon. They're eating like jerky, right? Don't they have like 30 pounds worth of jerky or something in the beginning of the episode?
They had a bunch of cans of beans and stuff, and like I don't know, like Joel and Ellie keep seeming to be whipping out these sandwiches here and there. How is this bread not moldy? My bread goes moldy in like a week.
Yes.
And this apocalypse, they've invented mold-free bread.
Yes, and it always looks so appealing, too, considering it's a post-apocalyptic world. It always just looks like wrappers for, like, McDonald's cheeseburgers, right?
Facepalm. Mold bread, that's how it started. Maybe there actually is mold-free bread now.
Oh, yes, that's exactly.
Maybe that's actually a thing. This is,
yes.
It's like Elven bread now.
Yes, Lambus bread. No, Fedra finally made some mold-free bread because that's what killed the world.
Oh man, did we just stumble on something?
I think we did.
Realization or something?
Yes, they're going to reveal it in the behind the scenes.
This is going to send this podcast into the stratosphere from the tens to the 11s.
Oh man, we're going from the 10s to the 30s. Oh, I can't wait. Oh man. Oh, so I don't even know where to go from there. Okay, so we're talking about Henry and Sam. And in that behind the scenes, they're talking about how Henry and Sam are like mirrors to Joel and Ellie. And they talk about how Joel realizes at this point that he would do anything for Ellie. And I guess it's because she reminds him of his daughter, right? But, in the behind the scenes, they were talking as if he didn't really care about anyone or he didn't have that stronger feeling for anyone prior to Ellie. But I feel like he was very devoted to Tess. Don't you think that's the way it seemed?
I think it in the show they implied a bit more relationship with Joel and Ellie than they did in the game. It was more like a general partnership, I think. But I think what they really meant though is being responsible for somebody. Joel and Tess were adults. They were generally responsible for themselves and they help each other, sort of. But like Ellie or his daughter and Sam, like you're responsible for their lives. Like you need to take care of them. They're not going to get by without you. So I think that's a big difference between comparing how his relationship with Ellie is, Joel's relationship with Ellie, that of his with Tess.
Okay, yeah, that's a very, very good point actually. And I think that besides like mirroring Joel and Ellie's relationship, I think that what we saw of Sam and Henry was sort of a pattern that we're seeing a few times in this series now, because you are following Joel and you see his life in the first episode. Then in the second episode, there really isn't any kind of flashback in that, but then we see Frank and Bill's whole life in episode 3, and then in this episode 5, you see Henry and Sam's life basically from when Kansas City gets overrun by the people that go against Fedra. So like,
this is a shorter time jump here, though. I mean, it's only maybe a week's time tops between when you're seeing Sam and Henry until when Joel gets there.
Yeah, and so they just kind of fill in the blanks, and I like stuff like that. Comic books do that a lot, actually, where they'll get you up to a certain point, you don't really know how they got there, and then the next issue might sort of catch you up. Bendis actually does it a lot in the comics that he writes.
So this looks bad.
What
I don't know. That's reminded me of like pretty much most of the Matt Fraction Hawkeye started, or one of the first issues started. He's just in a situation, and then you find out how he got there later on.
Oh yeah. In a comic book, you'll have like a one-page like spread where like Hawkeye's falling out of a window, right, shooting a bow and arrow, and he was like, "This looks bad." Movies do that too.
Yeah.
They're like, it'll freeze, and then they'll be like, "You might be wondering how I got here," right? Yeah. But it's interesting, right? Because when I was watching this episode with Sherry, she was saying that this was actually the first time that she didn't like a performance by Melanie Lynskey because we're such big fans of hers. And she thought that she was maybe kind of miscast as Kathleen. She thought that Kathleen kind of seemed too evil. But she said that just prior to finding out about Kathleen's backstory. So when Kathleen, when we find out about what happened, what actually went down in Kansas City, essentially Fedra was miserable there for like 20 years, just like, doing horrible things to the citizens, right? And then her brother was like a figurehead for their rebellion. He got the rebellion going, but then Henry essentially sold him out to get medicine for Sam.
Yes.
And so I think that made her a much more believable character because it wasn't like she rallied everyone. It was her brother's death. He was like a martyr. And essentially, she kind of rode on the backs of that, but she was so brutal that she was able to get things done.
I think they were implying that, while yes, the brother was kind of like the leader, like she was essentially like second in command already. And then just kind of took it into overdrive after he got sold out and killed.
Yeah,
I did really think it was interesting how that she even said, or I'm not sure if she said it or Pierce said it, but that the brother, even the brother, after being captured, said to forgive Henry. You know, and she wouldn't. I still do like the casting. I think it is atypical. It's not what you expect, and I think I appreciate that. But
Yeah.
I think she played it well, and
Yeah.
I think just the fact that it's not, like you would expect some like hardcore military guy, or someone that looks like rough and tough or something like that, and you just see this middle-aged woman and doing messed up stuff. I think that actually adds to it, something you don't expect. It's different. So that actually really worked for me, in a way that like, the casting of like the governor in the Walking Dead show or Negan from that same show didn't, because they were, you kind of expect like how they look, you expected them to act in a certain way.
Yeah. And yet again, like going back to what you said last time around, she's not even in the game at all. Like the
I'm sorry, I'm cutting you off so many times today.
No, good.
In the game, they're just like random scavengers. There's no backstory. They're just nameless enemies essentially that you're going through, and there is no Henry turning anybody in. They're just passing through essentially, and you just kind of meet them randomly. Going back to what you said about the mirroring, I really do. That is very, very true to me. In a sense that Henry was someone that was kind of an informant to Fedra, while Joel was obviously against Fedra in Boston and that area and working against them, but not in the capacity of, say, the Firefly. So it really was kind of an opposite. Like he really, Joel sees him as a rat at first, he does not trust him. And I really appreciated that detail and contrast to that mirroring that was not present in the game.
Yeah, well, I'm very interested to see like what happens with Sam and Henry and Joel and Ellie then in the game, since you don't have this whole dynamic of like the essentially Henry being a rat, right? That's not even in the game at all. And you said that these like sort of like just faceless kind of scavengers are coming after them. Then what is it? They just sort of go through the city, and it's just because Henry knows how to get through the city that they kind of go with him. Like how does that work in the game?
I believe the explanation is something to the point of you don't see any children with them. Meaning the scavenger people. Meaning that they don't allow kids. They assume maybe they kill them. I don't know.
Oh,
they're saying is that they're essentially all adults. They're all violent, and they're all if they find you, that they're gonna see you as a target and not an ally or a friend. So
yeah,
they're gonna see a kid as a sign of weakness and something that needs to be killed. So they probably see each other. They both have children with them, and they think, let's work together to get through this.
Yeah. It's interesting is that we see stories like this so often, and we start to anticipate what's going to happen, and we expect certain character types, right? And the actor that plays Henry, Lamar Johnson, I thought he was so charismatic. I really liked him. I'd like to see him in something else. And then, of course, his brother Sam was played by Kayvon Montreal Woodard, and I thought that he was just this sweet child, and like I liked just looking at him. I wanted to make sure that he was safe and fine. But then
it's hard watching it when you know the outcome too the whole time. It's like, oh
right.
man. In that regard, being younger makes it feel worse, honestly, I guess. So maybe that is a difference. So yeah,
but like
the whole time.
Right. And so what ended up happening was that when you look at these kind of stories where you have a person sort of being a rat, like a conspirator who essentially like gives information to the rulers or whatever, they're usually portrayed as sort of like weaselly guys, right? Or maybe like, kind of scared, shrimpy people. You don't usually see like a charismatic guy be a person that gives information to the bad guys, or it's like it could be like a mercenary that's out for themselves. Like, remember in Andor, there's that guy that he shoots point blank after they do the heist. I forgot that guy's name. Like either have that type where they're like this mercenary that's just out for themselves, and so they'll just like kind of sell out the good guys, or you have someone that's this sort of like sniveling coward. So it was very interesting to have this like kind of charismatic guy looking out for his brother be the informant for the bad guys. And the reason why I bring that up is because Sherry was kind of debating with me, did he do the right thing? Is selling out the whole rebellion just so that his brother can get medicine for his leukemia, is that really worth it? Is that the right thing? And I don't think she realized that she was quoting Star Trek, but she was quoting Spock, and she said, maybe the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, right? And I just was wondering, how did you feel about that particular point of view?
I think if you're looking at it from like a bird's eye view, and it's a little easier to say, the needs of the many do outweigh the few. But I think if you think about it from the perspective of like, this is my only family left, this is all I have left in the world, like what lengths would you go to for them? And I want to say that this question is posed in the game, really, and will show up again later.
Uh-oh. I don't like the sound of that. That's pretty ominous, man. Especially because they mirror each other. I'm a little worried now. So okay, now we need to talk about. Okay, let's talk about the underground portion. So they go underground and they find this sort of underground like bunker area. It's like a little underground colony. There's nobody in there, but there looks like there was a school set up there. And yes. Joel explains that like, some people went underground and started civilizations underground. They find a sheet of paper that says like Mr. Ish, right?
Yes.
Now, Neil Druckmann says that in the game, there's like a story that's going on in the game, and you sort of put that story together when you pick up pieces of paper and find these notes. So what's the deal with Mr. Ish?
That's essentially, you're kind of walking around this little underground area. It is abandoned, and you do find these little notes, like little collectibles in the game, and they just kind of paint a little picture of a story. So essentially, Ish is to someone who is alone. He meets this other group. They start trading, blah, blah, blah. They eventually come together, form a community, and then, they're in this area. They have a whole system. There's another guy that's also like has, armor and weapon, like shotguns and all that. But somebody leaves the door open and, shit, all hell breaks loose, shit goes down. But it seems like some of the people that they imply that some of the people made it to a safer spot. But ultimately you don't know what their ultimate fates are. You just don't find out. That's it.
Okay.
So it was a cool little detail to see that. You do actually go into that little area that has all the painting on the wall and the castle and things like that. So there was a lot of things that were visually similar from the game in this episode. In addition to that, the scene, the sequence where Joel goes after that sniper and then is sniping the things from the window. That's from the game. Although I'm pretty sure you're running away from people and not infected in that scene. But there's a couple segments in the game where it's like you're like in a sniper scenario.
Yeah, I thought like when I was watching, I was like, okay, this feels like a video game right here. Like this feels like this could be in the game. All right, so then that brings us to the infected in this episode. Now we're 5 episodes in. I haven't had a problem with the show. I've actually liked this show a lot. I really don't think I've had any complaints about it. There was one thing that I ultimately did have a problem with, and it happened in this episode. You have Kathleen and her people surround Sam and Henry and Ellie. And first off, in that arrangement, they're on one side of a car and everyone else is on the other side. And I feel like they could just easily go around the sides. Even if they were worried that Henry had a gun, I feel like they could have like just got them. You know what I'm saying? But besides that, right when it seems that they're going to capture them, that's when whatever the explosion had done lets loose all these infected. And I felt like that was just like too coincidental. How did you feel about that?
Maybe it was the camera shots because they're like literally 10, 15 feet away from each other. When Kathleen's talking to Henry, it's like there's 30, 40 guys there with guns and stuff.
Right.
And one dude with 2 kids and a sniper guy. What what's the worst that can happen here if you just walk ahead? And then, even when he stands up, there's nothing that she wants from him. She just wants to kill him. That's all. Like, she just wants revenge. There's no reason to hesitate in any capacity. So yes, the ultimate resolution here, where those rebels show up and confront them, is kind of rushed and messy. I will credit with the infected scene. I did think it looked kind of cool. We haven't really seen that kind of a swarm. I do appreciate the kind of boss monster idea, and you don't really see that thing in a TV show. I think so. That was kind of cool to me. I thought the creepiest moment out of everything was that little girl flipping through the car after Ellie. Holy shit!
yes.
Man, that looked creepy.
Yeah. So, for my other channel, The Lasercast, I watch a lot of horror movies, a lot of horror shows. And one thing I've been noticing in the past 2 years is there are a lot of horrible things that remind me of my own daughter, or at least one of my daughters, mainly my youngest daughter, my 6-year-old. There's always a little blonde girl, and something horrible is happening to them, or there's something horrible. And in this episode, this little fucking infected who was doing little flips. The actress must have been a gymnast or something, because she was just flipping and
she's
flopping.
Flopping around. Oh man, was that creepy?
Right. And she's the same height and build as my little blonde daughter. I'm like, oh my God, Jesus Christ. But I was going to ask you about the infected. So you have a bloater, and now last episode you and I discussed how in video games they have evolved versions of zombies, because it would get kind of boring always aggressively facing off against the same type of zombie. So is the idea behind a bloater, that giant creature, that it's aggressively fighting as if it's a warrior? Because the way that the infected come off, it's just they're just almost these puppets that are trying to break you down so they can infect you. But the way that he moved and fought, it was almost like an orc from Lord of the Rings or something,
Yeah. So the idea of why it exists is essentially that it's just a more advanced stage of infection. Mm-hmm. So that's a level 5 infection, I believe. So I think it's the most advanced, unless they added a level in the second game, which I haven't played. So it is a little counterintuitive logic-wise. I mean, this is supposed to be a colony, hive minding situation. Mm-hmm. Almost with the cordyceps infection, so it almost seems counterproductive to have a larger creature that goes out and destroys things. Mm-hmm. But really, you're better off infecting others in the process. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I guess they also may, get sustenance out of killing people too. I mean, that's probably part of it. But again, it's why come up and rip the guy's heads off? What use is that?
Right.
Afterwards. It's not going to come back as another infected person because there's no head on it, so they can't use it. I mean, maybe they can eat it. I don't even know if they really even show people them eating people.
Yeah. Do they eat people in the game?
I don't remember. Mm-hmm. I don't think so. Mm-hmm. I think the idea. They don't say. I'm fairly sure they don't say the zombie word, much like Walking Dead. They don't say zombie ever.
Right.
And there's just a lot of parallels between the infected and zombies.
Right.
So I don't think they do. Mm-hmm. But I could be wrong.
Yeah. Well, one of the thoughts I had last night, just kind of going along with this, is that for an HBO show and for a show about zombies, it's actually not that gratuitous. You just mentioned The Walking Dead. And The Walking Dead would show you everything, right? They would show little kids getting shot, or people getting ripped to shreds. And then you have Game of Thrones, which shows every fucking thing they could possibly show. They never kind of pull away. This show, however, I noticed that a couple of times when they shoot someone, it's off screen. In Walking Dead and stuff, they'll just show someone get shot right in the head. Even if it's a regular human, they'll just get shot right in the eye or something, right? But in this, they in the very beginning of this episode, there was a bunch of people that were shot, but you didn't see them get shot. There was a guy shot last episode. You didn't see him get shot. You do see horrific, horrible things every so often, but it's used very sparingly. You saw one guy a Fedra guard being dragged by a car and he had a whole bunch of knives in him. But I think that might have been like the worst thing in the episode. You know?
Yeah, and I think this honestly is a response to the criticism I've had of the game, where essentially there's this really deep, you know, well laid out and emotional story throughout the game. It's kind of off balance by how many just enemies you have to kill and how brutally you have to be in doing it. So
Yeah.
I honestly think it's kind of working better
Yeah.
in the game, because it's like, you know, things are bad, but it's not relentlessly, you know, dark in the sense that you have to kill hundreds of people and hundreds of infected and all that.
Right. Like one term that I hate to use is like elevated horror, because I feel like that's such a like cliche term. But there does seem to be, like, with HBO shows, like shows seem to be kind of cut from like a higher. They have like a higher standard,
It's
and
television.
yeah. It's like premiere television. Yeah. And so like I feel like with this show, the sort of the most honky or the weirdest kind of part was that bloater so far, and that was more like a video game versus like this sort of prestige show.
Yeah, I agree with that, but at the same time, maybe it does go against that what I said about the level of violence and contrasting that with the game. But I still think it's cool to see a boss monster in a TV show.
Oh yeah, I mean the way it was done, and I was telling Sherry this too. Like once they get out of that sequence and they're away from everybody, you know, all the things have turned and they're going towards the city, and that really kind of gave me chills. Them all just sort of scrambling towards the city. I was like, oh god.
Yeah,
Not
I also
like
don't think you ever see that amount at once in the game ever.
Yeah,
Like that was a lot.
yeah. Because how could you survive that?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you don't ever see children either, which we saw. You know, the creepy one flipping, which I believe was the same one that killed Kathleen.
It did. Yes. Yeah. So she's done, and then we finally have our little epilogue in the hotel outside of Kansas City. So that's the way that Sam and Henry die in the game.
Yeah. So there are a few differences in these scenes. Mainly that Ellie doesn't sleep in the same room as Sam overnight. Ellie also doesn't try to cure him. No one knows he's bitten. And they just kind of go like, "Oh, is Sam still sleeping?" Yeah, and then they go check on him, and then he runs out and attacks Ellie because he's infected. Beyond that, the actual the actual shots of when Sam is on top of Ellie and the movements of Henry and Joel are like exact. It's like shot for shot. That's
Wow.
exactly what happens. You know, Sam jumps on Ellie. Henry stands up, points the gun at Joel, saying, no, shoots near the floor, pauses for a second, kind of like looks around, then shoots Sam, and it's like, what did I do? What have I done? And then shoots himself, and then just is fade to black.
Wow.
And that's the end of like a chapter
Yeah.
in the game, and then I believe there's a time jump coming up after that.
Yeah. Yeah, because they get pretty far because they get to where the brother is now.
Yeah,
By the next episode.
And I believe it's winter now is also.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a decent time jump coming for in the game and in the next episode.
Yeah. I forgot to ask you before, is the comic book that they're reading, is that in the game?
There are comic books that Ellie reads in the game. I don't remember if they're exact, but being that like, you know, the choke she used from the game, everything seems to be taken from the game. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was exactly the same.
Yeah.
That Endure and Survive sounds right, but I don't exactly remember.
Right. I feel like if they were making a comic just for the show, that'd be too like cheesy. If like, because even though there are sci-fi comics and like it seemed like it was some sort of like Star Wars type story, right? Even though there are a lot of comics like that, you just kind of wouldn't picture that everyone was aware of a comic like that. You know, like we'd much more expect like someone was reading like Spider-Man or something if they found it, right?
And which is funny because Spider-Man is so associated with Sony, and you know Naughty Dog is Sony exclusive. So
yeah.
So I'm almost surprised it wasn't Spider-Man.
Right. So I mean, yeah, it's a tragic ending, and I kind of knew that was going to happen. It was all sort of played out, but it was just once again well done, right? Not
Yeah.
gratuitous. Um, so do you have anything else to say about episode 5 of The Last of Us?
Yeah. No, I guess not. I mean, I really just wanted to get across that this is one of the things, the most memorable things from the game. I think that this little sequence here, and I think outside of the confrontation between Henry and Kathleen, which seemed a little illogical and far fetched, it was an excellent episode and well adapted. And I do think they elevated with the changes they made outside of that one interaction, because that was just stupid and I don't know what they were thinking there.
Right. And I complained about how it seemed like too coincidental that all the infected came out. But when the car like goes into the house and then into the ground, and you're kind of seeing it from like behind her, and then the camera's kind of moving, I thought that was a very like cinematic moment. I thought that was like really cool. And
Yeah.
I really appreciate that moment, even though it just was like, oh, this is like too coincidental. But yeah.
Also, that's a huge scene to film. I mean, that's all actors, like.
I know. They showed the behind the scenes with all the extras and stuff. That was crazy. Yeah.
So it's impressive, and maybe that's why that scene had to suffer, because it was such a huge production to do otherwise.
Yeah, I can see that. Cool. All right. Well, we are digging this show. We're going to keep covering The Last of Us every Thursday. We record. It goes up on Friday morning. But now Brian and I are going to talk about the Super Bowl TV spots. I was thinking, since we have 3 to go, Brian, why don't we do Transformers, since it's so short? Then let's do Guardians of the Galaxy, and then let's do Flash, because we're most excited about that, right?
Yeah. Sounds good.
Okay. So Transformers, it's essentially a Porsche commercial.
Yeah, pretty much. There's not much to say here. This is the first time we're hearing Pete Davidson as the voice of Mirage. There's a lot of controversy in the Transformers community about how it's a Porsche and should be jazz, and blah blah blah. I can see both sides of it. Kind of like I think a lot of people are just annoyed that the jazz in the first Transformers movie from 2007. He was all silver. He was Pontiac Solstice. He wasn't a Porsche.
Yeah.
And while Mirage in this movie is not the exact Porsche that he was, it's close enough,
Yeah.
Although I don't think anybody could get away with casting Pete Davidson as Jazz, because you kind of have to cast Jazz as a African American, because Scatman Crothers.
Yeah, right.
So like you can't like. The only other major jazz that was ever in another Transformers series was in Transformers Animated, and then Phil Lamar played him, which was like perfect.
Oh.
And like, so yeah, they would need, and in the movie, what was his name? Is it Darius McCrary?
It was wasn't it the guy that's the older brother in Family Matters?
Yeah, Darius McCrary was Jazz in the 2007 movie,
right?
Which is also fine. But you can't cast Pete Davidson as Jazz, like 100%.
Totally understand. Yeah.
So in that regard, it's just weird that they're using Mirage as a human-related character, because the original is like rich, uppity, upper crust kind of guy who's reluctant to be part of the Autobots, and he almost considers joining the Decepticons, sort of. Like, that's in his toy bio. So,
wow.
It's a weird. It's just weird, but ultimately, the ultimate thing I'm trying to glean out of this is that Porsche actually gave the license to use the action figure and all that. And I'm really hoping we get a Masterpiece Jazz figure out of this, because we never could have it before, and we have almost everybody else from the G1 cast. So
yeah,
that's my main takeaway there. And the one thing that what was this, 30 seconds or something like that?
If even.
Mirage has 2 lines, and they're both the same thing. I'm Mirage. I'm like,
yeah.
You told us that already. Like, give me something else. Like, that was lame.
I 100% agree. Yeah. One of the probably the main influence for our channel, the main inspiration for our channel is the Weekly Planet, right? And I love the 2 guys on there, Mason and Mr. Sunday. They talked about this TV spot too.
I wanted to watch that. I forgot.
Oh yeah. Well, so they talked about this TV spot, and they mentioned how there's one Twitter account that's like crazy moments in Transformers history, and there was this moment where, you know what I'm talking about?
I follow that account.
Okay, well, basically they're saying that like Porsche didn't want to make a Transformer because like Transformers are or have their a Transformer turn into a Porsche because they're machines of war and they don't want to be represented that way. But then I think like that company has gone through some issues, right? And so they kind of want any kind of exposure they could get.
Um, yeah, I honestly I don't follow car makers, car
Yeah.
stuff outside of it. Was it a Transformer? Like literally,
Right.
that's all I care about. Like I can tell you what most of the car makes were from the original G1 cast.
Right.
But that's where that's where my knowledge of cars ends. I don't understand or know anything about it beyond that.
You and me both, man. Yeah. And so I remember that like Volkswagen didn't want Bumblebee to be a Volkswagen.
Yeah,
And
it
that's
took a
why
long time. It took a real long time to get that Masterpiece Bumblebee figure to come out, and yeah, there was always. Right now, Hasbro actually does have an active license with Volkswagen for that Bumblebee. Um, that car, the VW Beetle, um, you know, chassis. So
yeah.
that was a long time coming.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I'm just glad that they have a different friend character for the human protagonist in this movie besides Bumblebee. I like Bumblebee. You know, I don't hate Bumblebee, but like he's certainly been like used to death in these
Yeah,
live action movies.
I
So
I vastly prefer the little buddy Bumblebee
yeah,
rather than the badass Bumblebee.
right.
Like I think that they kind of lack that. That the series has always kind of lacked the little buddy aspect.
Yeah.
Where I mean, maybe you could argue that Wheels and Brains from the second or third movie were those little guys. We're sort of that, but no, I don't think so.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think his design is cool. Like when he's in his robot mode too. He almost kind of looks like if you look at RC in this new movie and him, they look like they could almost be siblings.
Yeah, the shape, the crest on the head looks very similar. Yeah, I could totally see that.
Yeah,
Maybe
but yeah, but then that's it for that trailer. There's nothing else to it. So let's go ahead and jump over to Guardians of the Galaxy. We essentially just kind of see more of what they've shown in the original trailer. It's not like they reveal like a new character. I think the most that we see is we see more of Adam Warlock in this, right?
Yes, we see a little more Adam Warlock. We see that they seem to be using those classic Guardians costumes a lot in the movie, which is really cool. I think we see what was her name? Who played Ratcatcher in Suicide Squad? The Suicide Squad.
Oh, I don't know that actress's name, but I can look it up real quick.
She's in it somewhere. There's like a extra background extra. I think I don't know if she has lines or not, but she's in the trailer.
Okay.
I think she's in the scene, one of the scenes with Star Lord and Nebula and Gamora in like an elevator or something.
Daniela Melchior.
Yeah, that's her.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, we see that there. What I got out of this trailer was that this movie is going to destroy me emotionally. I have different thoughts about who's going to die now, based on what I previously thought.
Yeah.
I still stand by that whole. This is James Gunn's like this is the end of this iteration. I do think some version of the Guardians will persist after this there, but who is in it, my opinion has now changed.
Okay, go ahead.
I think it's very obvious that Drax dies.
Right? Yeah.
Super obvious. But I think he's the only one that dies.
Okay, so what did you think? That like Rocket was going to die before, now you don't? Is that what's going on?
Yeah, I think so. I'm leaning towards Rocket being the lead character of the Guardians moving forward. I think Star-Lord and Gamora are going to leave the team, and I think Rocket and Groot are going to hang on there. Actually, you know what? Maybe Mantis dies too. I'm not sure. Maybe, but there was a couple scenes where, you see like Peter screaming at a monitor or something like that, and you see there's a shot of Mantis with a very worried look on her face. So maybe that could be Drax's death. I don't know, but I think that Drax's death is 100% guaranteed. But I think that's going to be the only heroic death in the movie.
Okay, all right. I do think that Rocket Raccoon might die, and I don't know. I mean, I guess like the pairing of him and Groot kind of makes it seem like they would be together, um, but it just seems like that's what the arc has been leading towards for the past two films. I agree with what you're saying with like Gamora and Peter Quill kind of being together because that's another arc that's been going on. But with Drax, it's like kind of what he wanted or his arc was completed by the first movie, right? Like even in the first movie, they make this little joke of, well, Ronan killed my family, but Thanos is the one that sent him. So like now I have to kill Thanos, but Thanos is dead too, right? So it makes sense for his story to end. I feel like there has to be something to with Mantis and Peter Quill being siblings. So I feel like maybe if one of them will die, maybe it'll be Quill and Mantis lives, and there's something about that. But one big kind of red herring or way that they kind of throw us off, I think, is they keep showing that scene where they're carrying Quill's like body.
Yeah.
And it's like too obvious to be like, oh well, he's gonna die because they want you to think he's gonna die.
But then on the same page though, there's plenty of scenes where everyone's helping Drax walk with a big giant black mark on his chest. So I mean that could be off-putting too. But I really do think that the characters that will continue on in whatever form or usage happens with this team will be Rocket, Groot, and maybe probably Nebula and maybe Mantis. I think Peter leaves. I think Gamora leaves. I think Drax dies.
Okay.
Previously,
right.
I was thinking that it was going to be Peter and Groot moving on, and then maybe Nebula and Mantis, but and then Rocket and Drax would die, but and Gamora would leave or something. Maybe she would die. I don't know, but that's my gut. I'm going with that, and let's save this point here so we can play it back when we see this movie in May.
All right, sounds good. Yeah. I wonder if we've ever made a video where we've made predictions like this and then we were totally wrong. We've made some predictions by this point.
I do like making predictions.
Yeah.
I actually remember when we offline we were talking about Star Trek, the newer Star Trek shows, and I used to record on the official Star Trek podcast years ago, and we were reviewing Discovery, and I called out like I so and so was from this like really early on, and it was very satisfying to be right.
Nice. Was the Mirror Universe?
Yeah, I mean, I does it matter if I no, whatever. I called out that Jason Isaacs' character was from the Mirror Universe, like pretty early on, and I was very proud of myself. I patted myself in the back, probably hurt my elbow or something like that doing it.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. That's cool that you were on that show too. It's
that was like a fun perk of the job. I really enjoyed doing that.
Yeah. Well, so then we got one more to go. We have The Flash, and this will actually be fun because we can actually speculate a lot. We can make some predictions for this. So first off, I don't think I actually have. You didn't really tell me how you feel about the whole thing.
Man, well, I mean, the major, hugest draw here is seeing Michael Keaton. The second they started zooming on his face, like you knew it was coming.
Yeah.
And that was worth price of admission for me.
Yeah.
Seeing that, honestly, that scene is kind of a counter to, not a counter, but you also see two different Ezra Millers as Barry opposite him. I guess I just really find his Barry annoying. And just seeing two of them, it seems like too much.
Right.
I'm hoping I don't get annoyed by it in the movie, but I feel like based on this trailer, that how annoyed I was at seeing two of him on the screen at once, I feel like it's going to get overbearing in the movie very fast. And it's going to be the entire movie where there's multiple Barrys, and it's not going to be cool like it was in No Way Home.
Yeah. I think you're right there. It's so bizarre because essentially we've only seen the Flash. Like we see him for like a split second in Suicide Squad, but then we've only seen the Flash in Justice League. And even with Justice League, there's two different versions, right? And you even have like different kind of variations. Like Flash and Cyborg are different in both versions of the Justice League. Cyborg is much more different. The Flash is kind of similar, but he's more serious in the Zack Snyder Justice League, and we see more of like his story with his father. I did notice that like his father is played by a different actor this time around. It's not Billy Crudup. I can't remember what the actor's name is, but he's that guy from Office Space. He's playing his dad. You know, the main guy from Office Space.
I know his name. It'll come to me in like when we were talking in like 5 seconds.
Okay, but we're just not really familiar with this character. Like, we don't see his origin. We just see a little bit of him in these two different movies, which are very different feeling movies. And we're supposed to have this kind of emotional connection to him. The trailer begins with him, I guess, like just trying to enjoy living in a reality where his mother wasn't murdered. But there's a price to pay for that. And you were talking about the two different Barrys. I think that essentially the younger Barry, the one that has like the longer hair, is almost going to be like a kid Flash to his Flash, right?
Yeah.
One shot they show in the trailer is a bolt of blue lightning going through your older Barry's chest and into the younger Barry. And like, I'm assuming you know this, but like that's how Kid Flash gets his powers. Like the Flash does the experiment that made him into the Flash right in front of Kid Flash, and then the lightning comes down and turns him into a Flash too. Yeah.
Totally see that as being plausible here, especially since it seems like the reality that Barry goes to, there's no metahumans, which includes being no Flash.
Yeah. And so what I think is going to happen is that, okay, so in the Flashpoint comic, when Barry changes reality, he doesn't have his Flash powers anymore. And he has to get some kind of crazy procedure done to get his powers back. I think he like electrocutes himself with an electric chair or something. But go ahead.
Doesn't he go back to his lab and try to recreate it or something? Is this something crazy?
Something, yeah.
Yes, he gets shot by a bolt of lightning, just like you're seeing in that. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I think is going to happen in this movie, because this is already different from the Flashpoint comic, is that maybe he still has his powers when he's interacting with his younger self, and then that bolt of lightning like gets rid of his powers and it goes into his younger self. And then in this trailer, in this commercial, they show a scene where Michael Keaton's Batwing is like in the sky and it gets struck by lightning, and then the lightning goes down a chain. And so I'm assuming that that's going to bring back Barry to make him the regular Flash.
I don't know if we're going to have Barry lose his powers or not. I think it's more so going to be that they need a second Flash. They need the younger Barry to have powers as well, because there's no one else to help them. It's essentially Batman, two Flashes, and Supergirl versus Zod and his entire army. So I think that's what it's kind of going to be.
Yeah.
Which I find interesting because the one of the backdrops in the comic is the battle between Themyscira and Atlantis. I guess that's what that is signifying here. Is this Kryptonians versus humanity and whatever they can come up with.
Yeah, right. And okay, so then with that scenario, did you know that Michael Shannon was going to be in this movie?
I did not.
Yeah. That was a big shock, man.
That was a very big shock, and I believe I read a rumor that they did have a Henry Cavill part that was cut at some point.
Oh.
So I don't know from where, if it was a current universe thing beforehand or after, or in the alternate universe. Honestly, the Flashpoint comic was a decent crossover, but the shining point of it was the Batman side story, and I'm curious if they go into any of that at all here.
Yeah,
and if they do, if that makes it too much of a Batman movie when it's supposed to be a Flash movie.
Yeah. Well, so that's the main question, right? Because I mean, they even had this. I mentioned the Weekly Planet before. That was one of the main things they talked about on the Weekly Planet was, is this the world of Tim Burton's Batman?
Ooh, that is a great question. I don't think there's enough information there to show it.
Right, because is it like Tim Burton's Batman world, and that like that's the world that Barry's mom is alive, or is it like there's a world where there's no metahumans and Zod's attacking, and then that Batman from the Tim Burton movies gets pulled into that?
No, I think it's going to be that's the Batman that's there. I don't think it's going to be any merging of universes outside of Barry coming here, and this is just how this universe is.
Okay.
But whether or not this is the exact Tim Burton world or not, I mean that would be interesting. But I feel like they're not going to do that.
Okay, I agree with you on that one. There's two different spots, right? There's the Super Bowl spot, and then there's the trailer, and there's different footage in both. In the Super Bowl spot, they show his Batcave a little more, and they show the different suits. I'm thinking that there might even be a section of his Batcave that like references his robes, because one thing that I think people don't realize or don't think about too much is that Batman and then Batman Returns, Batman Forever, and Batman and Robin that's all the same world. Like, even though it's different actors, different looks and stuff, it's all the same continuing story.
Yes.
And there was going to be a fifth Batman movie with like Scarecrow, and it was going to bring back Jack Nicholson's Joker and everything in like a nightmare kind of scenario.
I don't think I knew about that.
Yeah. But anyway, Batman and Robin was such a flop that nothing happened, right? But what's interesting to me besides that is that in the trailer they show a Batman riding on a motorcycle, and that motorcycle looks a lot like the Christian Bale motorcycle.
It does. I remember hearing a rumor about the trailer saying that there might be some other past Batman in there. I'm wondering if that was it, or if they're going to call Ben Affleck being there is it. I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
I would consider Ben Affleck a past Batman at this point.
Right.
I think like this is literally the last time we're going to see him in anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does look kind of like that Tumblr-esque Bat cycle.
Right.
Ears even kind of look like that a little bit from behind. So,
yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case there, and that would be really cool. But I am thinking that this is just one reality they're in. They're not going to hop realities. It's just going to be he goes to this one place. There's no metahumans, and they're just trying to solve it or get him out of there or something like that.
Okay.
What I'm questioning is that, I mean, ultimately we know that Reverse Flash was responsible for these things happening in the comic, right?
For killing Barry's mother.
He had a significant role in it at the end.
Yeah.
We haven't seen anything of that yet. And I'm curious if they're going to change that, or you just haven't seen it yet. Not supposed to be surprised. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like it kind of needs to be in there. I think.
Do you think that this younger Flash that we see so much is actually going to be him? It's just like it's been tricked.
That would be kind of cool, actually.
Yeah.
That might make two Ezra Millers tolerable.
The coolest thing. Okay, so like Michael Keaton saying I'm Batman. That's really exciting. Seeing Michael Shannon is like, oh my God, they're doing this too. But then the thing that got me the most excited, it's weird that this got me the most excited, but it was when the two Flashes run up next to each other and their feet touch, and one is blue lightning and one is yellow lightning. That was the coolest thing for me.
That was really cool. And one thing we haven't talked about also is Supergirl.
Yes.
I find it very interesting that they essentially took the design of Injustice Supergirl, which is a character that is in a dream sequence of one comic issue and in this movie. And I also kind of got a vibe of Earth 2 Val-Zod Superman, because it seems like she's being kind of kept in a cell somewhere, tied up in a straitjacket, which is exactly how you meet Val-Zod in the Earth 2 New 52 series.
Right, but in Flashpoint, Superman is also held by the government too.
Oh, he is?
Yeah.
I don't even remember Superman's involvement in that whole series.
So Flashpoint is just like your typical comic book event where there's the main miniseries, but then there's little tie-ins too, right? And there is a Go ahead. No, there's a Superman tie-in, but the idea is that, like, I'm pretty sure his ship crashes in Metropolis. The government gets him right away, and he's like kept underground. So he's like a shriveled up, like anorexic looking guy.
But that's also Val Zod, isn't it?
Yeah. Very similar. Yeah.
Yeah. I must have only read the Batman side story and the actual main story.
Yeah. But I mean, he's in the main story too. At the very end, he does help out and he's fighting and stuff. He's just like not his regular Clark self, you know?
Got it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, she's clearly like that version. That's sort of that kept away from the world, kept underground. She doesn't have her powers. Then they're gonna like free her, and then she's gonna be super badass and powerful.
Yeah.
So I mean, who knows? It's gonna like essentially reset the DC universe and bring us into James Gunn's world. But then we still have like 2 more movies after that, right? We have Blue Beetle and Aquaman.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's a confusing mess. Excited for this movie based on James Gunn's excitement for this movie. He seems to be pushing it, and just like you really are. I'm really surprised that you're doing the movie, and I think you guys are going to be too. And I think that is like beyond just hyping his own movies, sort of. It seems legit, but I mean, based on the trailer, to me, the price of admission is Michael Keaton Batman. Really.
I mean, honestly, I don't think I ever in my wildest dreams would imagine Michael Keaton's Batman and Michael Shannon's Zod in the same movie.
Yeah, no. That was not on anyone's bingo card.
You're right. Okay, cool. Well, I'm excited about that too, but I'm also excited about Ant-Man, which I'm going to see in about 1 hour and 40 minutes.
Oh, already? Nice. I don't even tickets yet. I've heard it's getting kind of beat up pretty bad.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, the reviews that I've heard like Movie Bob and like Dan Murrell, who used to be on Movie Fights. Like their reviews are just kind of like, yeah, this is what you would expect from a Marvel movie. It's not like, oh, it's special or it's great. It's just like, yep, it's the next one of in a series.
The next one you got to watch for the next
one. Right. Which is like, it's like the 32nd Marvel movie or something.
Yeah. I mean, if this is not superhero fatigue in play, I don't know what is.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So I'm gonna go see that, and then I guess you and I, no rush, but whenever you watch it, we can record a video just on that.
Yep, sounds good.
And do our rankings. Yeah, but I enjoyed talking about The Last of Us with you, and Brian and I will be back next Friday with The Last of Us episode 6 as we march on our way towards The Mandalorian season 3 too.
Yes.
Yeah, man. All right, so we will.